Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and we are looking at the call of Samuel, which is one of definitely my favorite passages of how somebody is called to ministry. And before we dive in, let us talk about a little bit what a call to ministry is. And for Samuel, it's to a distinct ministry, being a prophet, being the last judge of Israel. For me, I was called to be a pastor in eighth grade. And so, for a very specific ministry when it comes to the church, for you and for some others, though, it's not as specific. Sometimes it's a call, where do I go to church? Where do I work? Where do I move my family? Where do we live? What do we live in a house? Do we live in an apartment? Those type of things. And I think this passage, even though it's a specific ministry call for Samuel, I think it'll help you and I as we go through different calls in life. So, with that being said, let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 3. We're going to look at the whole entire chapter here. So, starting in verse 1. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. So, you have Eli, who is a judge, not a very good one, sadly, but he is a judge of the Lord, and he is also a priest as well. And so you would think that things would be going well. It's not. And not only that, but look how it's described at the end of verse 1, how Israel is described. And the word of the Lord was rare in those days, and there was no frequent vision. This means that there's a disconnection between Israel and the Lord. And a lot of that has to do with Eli and his sons. Phineas, I think it's Hophni and Phineas. And those two are mentioned in a big part of First Samuel chapter 2 is all about these two boys, Hophni and Phineas, which I believed that they were even called worthless men in chapter 2, verse 12. It's just obviously not very good that Lord ends up rejecting those two, and Hophni and Phineas, and he this then sets up for the call of Samuel in chapter 3. So we have this disconnect, but yet Samuel is there and he is ministering to the Lord. So there's this hope that maybe Samuel will change things, or the obedience of Samuel will change things. Let's continue verse 2. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. So in verse 2, it's interesting to see the blindness, the physical blindness of Eli, I think, compared to the spiritual blindness of the country in verse 1. I think there's a connection between the two. And then not only that, but the lamp that's being talked about in verse 3, most likely that's probably the lampstand, the golden lampstand that is talked about with the tabernacle. But my guess is that is a light show that somebody is here to minister to you in the presence of the Lord. I think that's probably what's going on here, but also it's the significance of the lampstand of God as well, which we see in the books of the law, like Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So you have that. And then verse 4. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, "Here I am." And Samuel ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, lie down again." So he went and lay down. So Eli is asleep at this point. Samuel is kind of, sort of, but it doesn't look like he really is actually asleep. It's kind of like when we stare at the ceiling kind of thing. But he goes back and the voice comes again. Verse 6. And the Lord called again Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call, my son. Lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Um, at this point, I want to stop here in verse 7. This also, I think, gives you kind of a look into how far Israel has declined, but also the state of Eli's judgeship. The fact that this young boy in his tutelage does not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord has not yet been revealed to him. Well, he's being tuteled, like, he's starting to be a priest. Like, what do you mean he doesn't know the Lord? What do you mean the word of the Lord hasn't been revealed to him? I think that means that Eli is just not doing his job, pretty much. And then verse 8. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Makes sense after 3 times. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, Speak, Lord, for your servant hears. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood, calling as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, Speak, for your servant hears. Then the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I'm about to do a thing in Israel at which the 2 ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. Now, before we get to what that is, Samuel obeys. He has no clue who this voice is. Could be a ghost. Who knows? And yet he does not hesitate to obey what Eli tells him, which again makes me so sad, because if Eli had done his job, has taught him who the Lord is, and showed him the word of the Lord, I don't think this passage would have even happened. If the Lord called Samuel, he would have just said, Speak, for your servant hears. But instead, he thinks it's Eli, because Eli hasn't taken that step to actually teach him. But now here's the message of the Lord that will make Israel just kind of quake in fear, basically. Verse 12, On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore, I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. And whoa, what a statement. What an absolute statement this is. Now, this then goes on a little bit later where Hophni and Phinehas die in a battle, and the Ark of the Covenant gets taken. Now, don't worry, it eventually comes back home, but this is the event that's coming that will shake the foundation of Israel, so to speak, and will thus end the house of Eli. And on news of this battle and the loss of the Ark of the Covenant, Eli falls backwards, and basically we believe breaks his neck and dies. So this promise here in verses 11 through 14 very much comes true. But let's see how Samuel reacts to this news. Verse 15. Samuel lay until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. I like here, it doesn't say, and Samuel woke up the next morning. It just says Samuel lay until morning. It doesn't mean that he actually slept. It's almost like he pulled an all-nighter, because he was just like, what just happened? That And again, he's a young guy, so it's very possible that he probably didn't sleep the rest of the evening. But still, that's something that just makes me chuckle when I see this. Verse 16, but Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he said, here I am. And Eli said, what was it that he told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you, and more also, if you hide anything from me of all that he told you. So Samuel told him everything, and hid nothing from him. And he, being Eli, said, it is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. So Samuel is faced right off the bat with this moment that is, you have to have a lot of courage in this moment to go, you know what? I know that this person is an authority in my life. They hold power as well. And I could get in a lot of trouble if I tell them this and they get offended by it. I could get in a lot of trouble for this. But yet he does not hesitate. Now, granted, Eli, kind of puts a threat on it, but still, he shows that, look, don't hold back. I want to know. And based off what he says, Eli responds actually very maturely, I believe. It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. Now, some will say, oh, this is defeatist language. He's just given up at this point. Maybe, but I think he's just realized that, look, yeah, I have messed up. And so because of that, I need to accept whatever discipline is coming. And it doesn't mean that Eli's going to hell. It doesn't mean that. It just means that he's messed up in the call that God has put Eli in. And sadly, it's affected a lot of people. Verse 19, and Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. Basically, what that means is that anything that Samuel, anything that Samuel, I almost said David again, anything that Samuel spoke that was from the Lord came to pass. And all Israel, verse 20, from Dan to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. Again, a prophet is not somebody that looks into a crystal ball and tells the future. Don't get me wrong, a prophet can tell things about the future, but it's only the things that he is told by the Lord himself. He is pretty much a mouthpiece, and that's about it. Don't get me wrong, that's still cool. But that's kind of what a prophet is in this context. It's not a fortune teller, basically. And it's interesting to see, too, the contrast between Eli and the spiritual laziness or lack of a spiritual life within Israel during his time. But then as soon as Samuel comes onto the scene, as soon as the Lord begins to use him as his mouthpiece, as his prophet, Israel begins to wake up a little bit, which I think is really interesting to see here in verse 21. Now, at the end of the day, what should we learn about this when it comes to our call on our life? Now, again, specific ministries, but let's just say in general, anything that's coming up, a big event. First, go to the Lord, ask him, be specific about it. And when he does respond in whatever way that might be, maybe it's not audibly like it is here with Samuel, even though that'd be pretty cool. Even if it's not that way, then make sure you listen, whether it is through your pastor or through your Sunday school teacher or just you during your quiet time or your devotional or through other brothers and sisters. If they give you a piece of advice that, look, this actually kind of lines up with what I've been praying about, then obey. Listen, obey, search, pray through every single event, every single call that the Lord has on your life, whether it be vocation or family or moving, whatever it might be. It all starts with prayer. It all starts with the communication with the Lord. And what we see here with Samuel, it's all a prayer. This is all a prayer here between the Lord and Samuel. Again, it'd be cool if we could experience the audible part of it. but we still have this connection today as followers of Christ because we are indwelt by the Holy Spirit. So, with that, I will see you tomorrow with the Brahmin word as well as we continue to look at the life of Samuel. Thanks.